All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ann Ellis with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District. Let me do one last sound check. Can my team still hear me? I think I saw a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Thanks, folks. Thanks so much for joining online today for the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study, our quarterly public update. Joined today by my colleagues from multiple districts across the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, both within the New Orleans district where I'm located, as well as Vicksburg, Memphis, St. Louis districts, Mobile district, and Little Rock district. This is certainly an enterprise-wide effort that the Corps is undertaking for the management of the Lower Mississippi River. We're really excited to create this space for you to update and provide you the latest information on the study, and really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to join us. Our intent is to hold these meetings every 3 months to provide you regular updates on where we are in the study process and really give you the opportunity to ask questions or voice any concerns that you may have. So at the end of today's meeting, I'm going to provide you a link for a short questionnaire to get some feedback on how useful this meeting was and how we can improve this webinar series in the future. I'd ask that you, as we go through this content, please be thinking if it's effective and if there's any updates or any improvements we can make to do this better. So before we get started, I'd like to cover a few logistics for the meeting. All of your microphones have been muted, and once we finish the presentation, you'll be able to come off of mute and ask questions. And there's a few different ways that you can submit questions or comments during today's meeting. So first, you can use the WebEx chat feature by clicking on Add a Comment. The little window will pop up and you'll see that the comment will be submitted to everyone, which means that everybody in the WebEx will be able to see your comment. And then you can also come off of mute. You can either raise your hand. There's a little kind of hand icon you see there on the screen. It should be located near the bottom of your screen. And then we'll call on you if there's several folks that have their hand up. We'll try to go in the order at which we saw them pop up. And then folks are also welcome just to come off of mute. I would ask that folks allow me to get through the whole presentation before you come off of mute, just so we can get through the material, as we may answer your questions in the slides themselves. But certainly we'll leave plenty of time at the end of the presentation for questions. And then as a reminder, you can always submit comments and feedback to our email address. So if something comes to you after the meeting ends, or you think of something later, you're always welcome to reach out to me and the rest of the study team at the email address you see on the screen, which is lmrcomp@usace.army.mil. Just to help us keep our emails organized, if you wouldn't mind putting quarterly public update in the subject line, that would help. And then if you happen to be joining only by phone today and you're not able to see the screen, your phone should still be muted, but you can come off of mute by hitting the star button followed by the number 6. So that's *6 to unmute yourself. And then maybe the last technology tip I'll provide, and this is based on lessons learned, is if you join by computer and you're on your phone, sometimes you got to click unmute on both. So you get the double mute where you're muted both on your computer and your phone. So if you have trouble getting off of mute later, make sure to check those settings both on your cell phone and the computer. So with that, I am going to dive right into the content. I will make one last note. We are going to record today's meeting. I believe that recording has already started. We do provide the recording and the presentation materials on our website. So if anybody was not able to join today, they have access to this information. And I will say, since I'm sharing my screen right now, I can't actively see anything in the chat. So if anybody on my team, I guess, is trying to get my attention, or there's something I need to stop and pause along the way, would ask someone on my team to help me out here by just coming off of mute to let me know. And finally, my last instruction. Sorry, I keep thinking of things. For the most part, we can see folks' names in the WebEx, but what really helps us keep track of folks as they participate is by having everybody type their name and their agency in the WebEx chat. So if you could please take a minute to do that, we'll make sure we get you all. I think most of you we probably have in our stakeholder database, but that allows us just to keep a record of who participated. So appreciate it in advance if folks would go ahead and put their name and agency. And if we don't already have your contact info, we will respond in the chat to get that information. Okay, I think I finished all of my instructions. So I'm gonna dive into the agenda as you see here on the screen. We're gonna recap the study purpose. This may be the first meeting for some. It may be the third, fourth, or fifth for others, right? So we'll try to hit on a little bit of the study background and where we are in the study process. We'll really focus on the progress we've made since the last time we updated you all in June. Going to focus on the screening process and provide an overview of some of the modeling that the study team is currently taking, and then revisit our timeline and kind of show where we're headed over the next 90 days. We're going to take a short 2-minute break. That'll give me a chance to catch my breath and get a glass of water. During that time, I would ask if you have questions, put them in the chat or just be thinking about them. And so when we come back together about 2 minutes after, we can have a facilitated dialogue and really hear from you all. And then at the very end, I mentioned this before, at the very end, we do have a short questionnaire. We're always looking for feedback on our communication. So really would appreciate folks taking the time to fill out that survey. It takes like 30 seconds. So before you log off, we'll ask you to do that. Okay, so a quick recap about the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study. So why are we studying the Mississippi River? Well, like everything the Corps does, right, it always begins with authorization from Congress. So Congress authorized this study in Section 213 of the Water Resources and Development Act of 2020, which was also amended in WRDA 2022 to make it 100% federally funded study. And so in this authority, the Corps is directed to conduct a comprehensive study of the Lower Mississippi River Basin from Cape Girardeau, Missouri to the Gulf of Mexico. And the study will identify actionable recommendations for the comprehensive management of the basin for multiple purposes that you see here on the screen. So flood risk management, navigation, ecosystem restoration, and so on and so forth. I think we all recognize how this study is a unique and historic opportunity to improve upon the existing Mississippi River and tributaries project by providing recommendations that can result in an adaptable, resilient, and sustainable river for the next 100 years. I know in previous meetings, some of you have asked, how does this study differ from other efforts currently underway on the river? And so we do know that in the southern portion of our study area, that there's efforts underway by universities and non-governmental organizations that are looking at the sustainability of the Mississippi River Delta. We also know the state of Louisiana is developing a master plan, not only for their coast, but also for specifically targeting the Atchafalaya Basin. And there's also the ongoing work, such as the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee's efforts to implement aquatic habitat restoration and Mississippi River access improvements in kind of the middle portion of the river of our study area. And so we are coordinating with these groups and others on their efforts, but we do rely on venues such as these quarterly public updates to hear about any other efforts that are currently underway so that we can leverage any other information and results that are coming out of these efforts and try to sync up as much as possible across different efforts. So the Corps uses a risk-informed decision-making process called SMART planning to conduct our feasibility studies. We are also required to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, when we conduct studies. And so both the feasibility planning process and the NEPA process are integrated, and that really allows us to streamline our decision-making and avoid the duplication of requirements across these two processes. So NEPA requires that all federal agencies use an early and open process called scoping to determine the scope of issues for analysis, including identifying the significant issues and eliminating non-significant issues from further study. So scoping includes public outreach, as well as agency coordination to hear from persons and agencies who may be interested in or affected by the project. And so the information collected during scoping is then used in the feasibility study process to develop solutions. So as part of the feasibility study process, we have completed the alternative milestone. And on the NEPA side, we have identified the need for action and begun the scoping process. However, scoping will continue as we move towards the tentatively selected plan milestone. We'll talk more about that in a second. So for those of you who may have joined the previous meeting or maybe haven't had a chance to engage on our previous quarterly public updates, on the left-hand side of the screen, it's just a brief recap of our previous update. So we held our public orientation meeting at the beginning of 2024, and then we hosted our public scoping meetings across the study area in February and March. We've also been engaging with our tribal nations through several targeted outreach efforts with them. During our last quarterly public update, we talked a lot about the public scoping process and the comments that we have received. And so since that meeting, we've released our public scoping report, which is available on our website that you see here on the screen. And as I mentioned before, we've also achieved one of our internal milestones called the Alternative Milestones Meeting. And that really is to ensure that there's concurrence and alignment across the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers leadership on the scope for completing the study and our overall process for how we plan to get to the tentatively selected plan. So then what's new is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So we continue our external coordination with our federal and state partners, tribal nations, and stakeholder activities and events. We've been reviewing all of the input we received through the scoping process and our screening measure based on criteria, which we'll be showing you today. We're also starting to develop the process for tiered studies. So some may recall that this study authority allows us to tier off potential problems and opportunities into a separate feasibility study. So the process for how that will be done is currently under development right now. And then we're also conducting and getting our models ready for the alternatives analysis. And so we'll talk a little bit today about what those models look like and the types of outputs that those models will produce. So just a quick reminder of our public scoping report I just mentioned. It is available on our website. I know some of you have already reached out saying that you've accessed that report, so that's really great to hear. It includes kind of both a summary of what we heard, but also has a record of all the comments received. Okay, so now to get in a little bit more to the process of how we're taking all of that input and screening the measures and using that information to develop alternatives. So what we're showing you here is our stepwise approach to formulating and screening alternatives. Starting at the very bottom of the triangle, we are developing a water and sediment budget for the Mississippi and Atchafalaya rivers. We will use that information to identify where there's flexibility in how and when our existing water control structures distribute water and sediment in the system, while still ensuring that we maintain our flood risk management and navigation mission areas. So this information will help us screen measures and identify solutions that don't impact our critical mission areas of flood risk management and navigation. Moving to the regional features, we are using the input received to date to identify measures for all our mission areas that can fit within the system-wide water and sediment budget. So while the water and sediment budget is under development, we are conducting initial screening against a suite of criteria that we will show in a couple of slides. And lastly, once we complete our measure screening process, we will then formulate the measures into alternatives and identify the tentatively selected plan. So just as a reminder, a measure is a feature or an activity that can be implemented at a specific location to address the study objectives. And then to build alternatives, we package those measures together, and essentially they serve as the building blocks to a full alternative plan. And as I mentioned before, we do have the authority to identify tiered studies and programs. Those would be separate efforts that would need to be funded by Congress before they could begin. We do not plan to wait until the end of the 5-year study to recommend tiered studies. We will communicate any potential tiered studies during these quarterly public updates, but then also formally document them in our annual report to Congress so that Congress can act on them before the LMR comp study concludes. So a little bit more about our measure screening process is depicted here. So across the top, you see that the study team has received a lot of input received to date, right? Including input from our federal and state partners, stakeholders, the public, our public scoping meetings, these quarterly public updates, our tribal meetings, essentially all of the engagements that we've been doing with you all over the last 2 years. We're using that information to develop measures. And we're now in the process of screening those measures. And so simply to manage the sheer volume of input that we've received, we established focus groups around topical themes to conduct the evaluation process. And so what I mean by a kind of a topical theme focus group, it could be something that was geographically based or around a particular project. So for example, we had focus groups focused on the Atchafalaya Basin and the Bonnet-Carré Spillway. We had others looking at mainstem river ecosystem restoration and navigation on the mainstem Mississippi River. We had groups looking at operational modifications to our existing Mississippi River and tributary project structures, as well as groups looking at the recommendations coming from our tribal engagements. We had some focused on locks, dams, and reservoirs, while others were looking at sediment and grade control, as well as Louisiana ecosystem restoration, recreation, groundwater, water supply, among others. So these were just the different ways that we bucketed or categorized the sheer amount of information that we had. And so the project delivery team is actively reviewing all of those measures in each of those buckets and screening them based on the criteria that I'll show you on the next slide. But I want to be clear, we are not doing this in a vacuum, and we continue to coordinate with our stakeholders and our agency partners as we work through their input. We held an interagency coordination team meeting, in fact, just this week, with our state and federal partners to give them an opportunity to provide input on the measure. And again, we're using forums such as this as well to give you updates and allow you to provide feedback on where we are. But I want to be clear that we are not finished screening yet. Our goal is to have a final list of measures early in 2025, and then really start building and have some alternatives built in the summer of 2025. And we'll continue to provide you all updates through these quarterly meetings. Okay, so what are the screening criteria that we're using right now for these measures? So first and foremost, is it a duplicate, right? So oftentimes we had multiple individuals recommending the same measure. Does the measure fit within the authority and the scope of the study? Is it technically feasible? Will that measure increase flood risk or cause life safety concerns? Will it transfer risk or impact to somewhere else? Will it negatively impact the environment, or will it provide environmental benefits? Are there existing authorities, projects, and programs within the Corps that are already implementing this measure, or is it might be better suited to implement the measure? Will the measure effectively achieve the benefits proposed? Is the measure cost effective? And does the measure meet our study objectives and avoid our constraints? Some of our study constraints are listed here. So starting at the top, one of our constraints is that there could be no reduction of authorized navigation performance. There could be no loss of risk reduction from our existing flood risk management and coastal storm damage risk reduction projects. We have to avoid and minimize negative impacts to threatened and endangered species, protected species and critical habitats, and essential fish habitat. We have to avoid and or minimize negative impacts to cultural resources and historic sites. We have to avoid and or minimize negative impacts to municipal, industrial, residential freshwater infrastructure, and tribal usage along the Mississippi River and tributaries project. We have to avoid inducing development in floodplains that contributes to increasing life safety risks. And USAIS cannot authorize, approve, or carry out activities that result in a breach of tribal treaty rights, affect lands, or restrict access to resources. And then that one at the bottom is sort of a catch-all, right? We have to be in compliance with all applicable laws and all of our USAIS civil works policies. So with that, I'm now going to walk you all through some of the measures that are currently retained within the study. I am going to show them by mission area, but I want to acknowledge that many of these fall under multiple missions, multiple purposes. So strictly from a PowerPoint organizational standpoint, we tried to lump them by mission area. This is work that's in progress, right? We want to keep you all updated as we go along. But with that comes a caveat, right? That these are still subject to change and are simply examples right now of where we are in the study process. So some of the measures the team is looking at for reducing flood risk include optimizing how we operate old river control structure, Morganza and Bonnet-Carré, potentially widening and deepening Wax Lake Outlet, utilizing some of the diversions, increasing dredging in specific locations that are aggregating, and closing distributaries in the Atchafalaya River to increase stream power and reduce dredging. Some of the measures for improving navigation include looking for options for grade control and stabilization of Hickman Control Point, addressing low water in the main stem and harbor entrances, considering relocating the navigation channel in the vicinity of Stouts Pass, and restricting flow downstream of the East Bank crevasses on the Mississippi River to regulate flow. Some of the measures for improving ecosystem restoration are utilizing woody debris taken from revetment construction to create habitat, restoring a variety of different habitats, returning flow to abandoned oxbow lakes and meanders, installing river training structures to divert water to upstream ends of secondary channels, restoring connectivity to secondary channels and restoring wetland buffers on the riverside of the mainline levee system, dedicated dredging for wetland enhancement, dredging sand from the river and placing in crevasses for land building, and strategically mounding sand during low water to mitigate intrusion and promote land building. Measures for water supply reliability, including continuing dredging in the Atchafalaya in select areas for drinking water reliability, increasing flows down the Atchafalaya to the Chinamacha reservation lands to provide adequate water supply, pumping water into oxbows such as Moon Lake to allow controlled releases to tributaries. Measures for improving access for recreation emergency response include partnering with organizations to implement walking and biking paths along existing features, reconnecting secondary channels for recreational access and use, installing boat ramps, public access points for recreation, emergency access, and data collection, reconnecting flows to secondary channels to improve conditions for recreation. So some of these you may have noticed were, again, fell across multiple mission areas because many of these really are intended to be multi-mission measures. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about some of the models that are under development. So for the hydrologic modeling for this study, two models will be used. We have a 1D HEC-RES model of the Mississippi River that's shown on the right-hand side. It spans over 1,000 river miles, extending from above the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers all the way down to the Gulf. And then we have a 1D and 2D HEC-RES models of the Atchafalaya River. And collectively, these models will produce hydrographs, water surface elevation, levee profiles, inundation, flow rates, and allow us to look at the timing and activation of the operation of our structures. And we're going to use this information to screen our measures and evaluate the system's response to changes in these conditions. We are going to look at multiple climate events in running the models, from high river years to low river years, as well as the project design flood, or PDF. We also are developing a sediment model called HEC-6T. It is a 1D numerical model that will be used long-term and system-wide to look at changes in sedimentation, both in the Mississippi and the Atchafalaya River. It's going to allow us to evaluate the response of the river in terms of water surface elevation changes, bed elevation changes, and sediment transport. As we move from measure screening to building alternatives, we will have to compare the alternative plans, which will include a no action plan, against each other. And a comparison of the outputs of these alternative plans must be made, and the beneficial and adverse effects of each plan must be compared, including monetary and non-monetary benefits and costs. So the study team will identify a single alternative from among all of the alternatives that have been considered, and that will be what we call our tentatively selected plan. It must be shown to be preferable to taking the no action. So the yellow circles represent the milestones we're working towards. So to get there, we must complete our review of measures. We have to execute our modeling and compare alternatives. And then we're going to continue to conduct meetings such as these, as well as with our agency partners. We'll also begin to document the information in our draft integrated feasibility report and NEPA document. And again, we're working towards selecting that tentatively selected plan as well as identifying recommendations for tiered studies along the way. So with that, our next quarterly public update, we're going to target January in 2025. But this concludes the presentation. We're gonna pivot to questions and comments. Before we open the floor, I'm just going to take a quick 1 minute, maybe 2 minute break, and then we will start the question process. But if you have questions already, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I have not been looking at the chat, so there might already be some in there, which is great. So please go ahead and populate in the chat. We'll start with those, and then we'll start calling on folks online. So I have 2:26 on my end. We'll come back at about 2:28 and start the question and comment session. Okay, so thank you all for allowing me to take a quick 2 minute break, and we'll go ahead and start. Let me see if I can see who's online. I apologize. When I'm sharing my screen, I lose the participant list. Let me move it over to my other screen. Let me get the chat open, and we'll start. We'll start with the Q&A. All right, I think the first several are people introducing themselves. I don't know, Cherie, do you want to help me identify where the first comment or question is? I see a comment. Actually, let me just verify. Can folks hear me? All right, thanks, Ricky. I saw the thumbs up. So I see a couple comments in the chat. One about was the diversion proposals have the same constraints. I believe every municipality environmental group in South Mississippi is on record opposing the Mid-Breton diversion. We have captured that feedback. What does a climate resiliency and adaptability model run look like? Alex, that's a great question. And I do know that the team is actively working with our Climate Resiliency Center of Expertise within the Corps to define that. But I will allow if Caitlin Costanza wants to expand on that at this point, or we can be prepared to follow up with you on that. I think there's some folks having trouble getting off of mute. So Ryan, we may need some help from you to get unmuted. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm off of mute now, but not sure what question you asked last.
Okay, I was seeing if Caitlin Costanza was on and wanted to comment on the climate resiliency and adaptability model run, but we can come back to that I'm going to move to the, because I don't actually think I see her online. So we'll come back to that, Alex, and see if we can get you an answer today. If not something, that's something we can follow up with you on.
Hi, Anne. It's Caitlin. I could not come off of mute. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Caitlin.
Yes. So the climate adaptability and resilience runs would is to evaluate the risks in the system if we were to ever see a flood greater than the project design flood. So it's to evaluate those potential risks and evaluate the resilience of the system.
Great. Thanks, Kate. And Alex, if that doesn't answer your question, feel free to put another chat. We'll come back to that. And just looking at the WebEx settings, you may need to put a comment in to get somebody to unmute you. Sean Duffy, I see your comment, your suggestion for defining the system-wide water and sediment budget. The differences, yes, agree, the differences are important. And I think as we get further along in developing that water and sediment budget, we'll be ready to kind of report that out during our next quarterly public update.
And can I ask Sean to add a little bit of clarification to the last part of his question? Just try to understand what the information would be used for, because that can better help us determine how to do the analysis as far as suspended sediment and bed load sediment. That is part of the sediment transport modeling, but just wondering if you have a specific question or use for that information, Sean. And I don't know, are people able to come off of mute now, Ann? Or I guess, do they raise their hand? Is that how they, oh, there we go.
It looks like I was able to, I must have been cleared. I just think it's, I mean, when we talk about water budget, I mean, a lot of people have been doing that. And over the last few years, I mean, we're seeing more and more, everybody knows the salt water. And if we're just looking at a water budget, we're not separating the difference between the two. And it's really important that we do. And a lot of times we hear we have less sediment. I agree we have less suspended sediment, but I think there's at least some modeling and science that indicates we may have more bed load sediment than we ever had. And I think those differences are important because they're lumping water and sediment into the same just doesn't capture the differences between those two different types.
All right, thank you for that, Sean. That definitely helps.
All right, I'm going to move down the list. Austin, what measures or alternatives have been defined addressing the issue of saltwater intrusion and drinking water resiliency for communities along the lowermost river? So Austin, I can say that one of the things that we're looking at is in changing, is putting together potential measures and alternatives for how we operate our existing structures. So seeing if there's flexibility to push water down the river when the river is low. So right now we're constrained to that 70-30 split. And so one of the things we are looking at is to be able to dynamically manipulate that flow split so that when water conditions are low, can we put more water down the river? So that's just one example of a way that the team is looking at kind of the saltwater intrusion issues in the lower portion of the lower river. I'll also say there's other work currently underway that's separate from the LMR, the Lower Mississippi River Comp study, that's modeling the saltwater intrusion effort. So there's other activities that the Corps is currently undertaking as well to address the issue of saltwater intrusion and drinking water. But I'll see if anybody else from my team has anything else to add to that. Okay, Billy, which version of the Atchafalaya model is being used? Is there any plan to incorporate data from the Louisiana Watershed Initiative models into that model? I'd ask Kate, I can go back to the Atchafalaya model slide, but Kate, do you want to? Help answer this question about which version of the model is being used?
Currently, for the hydraulics HECRES 6.5 is being used. And for the Mississippi River, we used 2022 and 2023 bathymetric data for most of the river. So, and then for the Atchafalaya, we incorporated the best available data for the bathymetry that we had. So we do have access to the LWI models. And so the most up-to-date data and surveys were incorporated into both models. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Caitlin.
Excellent. Good. Great questions. All right. Mark Davis, South Dakota is seeking to initiate a federal study into the feasibility of diverting water from the Missouri River. How would that sort of possibility be addressed in the LMR comp study? Oh, Mark. I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that question on the fly. I think I'm getting a little bit more information. But also open it up to see if there's a teammate here that who might be able to assist. If not, this is something we can chat about and get back to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Dan, are you looking at the one for diverting water from the Missouri River? Sorry.
Yeah, Mark Davis's comment. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are looking at the locks, dams, and reservoirs in the upper portion of the lower river. So there, if that's something that is good to bring to our attention. So we know that is ongoing. We will be cross collaborating with our Great Lakes Division and others while we're doing that evaluation. So appreciate you bringing that forward, and we will bring that back to our focus group that's working in that region.
I mean, I don't know. I doubt it if that initiative goes anywhere at the moment, but I have a feeling it's going to be back in the next Congress. And it would be an out of basin. It would essentially be taking water out of the basin to northern parts of South Dakota and possibly North Dakota.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mark.
for that, Mark.
Okay, I know that I'm noticing that there is at least one hand up. So I'm going to take a pause from reading questions. And why don't we go to folks online? I see Mr. Dean Wilson, Atchafalaya Basin Keeper. You have your hand up. I think you can unmute yourself. So go ahead, Dean.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to tell you that the tutorial you did at the beginning, I think it will be very helpful for people that are trying to learn about technology, how to participate on these webinars. And I want to thank you for that. I also wanted to let you know that the sediment river sand, we have seen a huge increase over the years of river sand in the Atchafalaya Basin. So another thing is like, Colonel Jones is meeting regularly with commercial fishermen in the basin. And I want to underline how important that is. I've been in the Atchafalaya Basin for 37 years now, researching the basin. I was a commercial fisherman for many years. And I'm telling you, I hope the hydrologists are not as wrong in other places as they have been in the basin. Over and over again, they have been wrong on the predictions and projects. And many of the projects have done incredible damage to the basin. The fishermen have been right almost every single time. So I encourage the Corps to keep the line of communication with the local people, because it's very hard for them to participate in this. Most of them don't have a computer. Some of them can use a phone, but they're not technology savvy. So it's very, very hard for them to participate. But that's a source of information that is extremely accurate and very, very important to make sure that no more damage is done to the flood capacity of the basin, especially, and water quality. But and then another thing I wanted to bring up is to your attention is freshwater supply for New Orleans. We know that sea level rising, we're gonna have more droughts and more floods, meaning that over time the situation is getting worse and worse. If sour water goes through those pipes, the corrosion that they may do to the pipes, we make, a problem this it won't be able to be fixed with corrosion, with especially with lead pipes. So I think it's very important to do before that happen, to be proactive and to come up with a plan of how to supply New Orleans and other areas, with fresh water in the possible worst case scenario, and not wait until the problem is right there and then start building a pipeline in the last second when the problem's already been created, when it's too late. So I would encourage you guys to figure out a way to manage that before the problem, happen. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dean, for your comments and also for that reminder about making sure that our outreach efforts are truly reaching those that are either interested in the study or have the potential to be affected by the study. I know virtual sometimes might be easiest for us, but I hear you that there's folks that don't have access to it. And so one of the things the team is actively working on is an environmental justice outreach strategy to engage with those who may not have access to events such as this. And I think as we narrow down a little bit more, we're going to start going back out and doing more kind of in-person engagements. I know we did that big push back in February and March, but we will certainly be looking for opportunities and welcome ideas, right, on and ways to leverage either existing community centers or groups who can maybe help us conduct some of that outreach or have places maybe where we can host it, or certainly always open to input on how to do this better. So appreciate that, Dean.
Yeah, thank you. And you always can work with the groups that represent those voices, which is LCPA, Western Atchafalaya Basin Keeper. We can facilitate those connections and share of knowledge. Thank you so much, Ann.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to go back. Let's see. I'm going to take another hand up, and then we'll go back to the chat. So, Gerald Blessy, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. These are on the chat, but I just wanted to quickly cover a couple of questions. My first one was whether or not you'd consider, maybe it's in the tiered recommendations, adding modern water quality stations that can measure the water quality from Lake Pontchartrain through Lake Bourne, Mississippi Sound, and Mobile Bay, so you'd have more real-time data about the water quality impacts from the Bonnet Carré openings. The Bonnet Carré, of course, is leaking every day, as you know. And I just wondered if that's a consideration, about Congress paying to do that. That's my question. That's one question. I have two others.
Yeah, well, let me take a stab at answering that one, and again, encourage any other teammate online. Within this study, Congress directed us to at least leverage as much as existing data information we can. However, I do believe there's other data collection that's taking place outside of the construct of the Lower Mississippi River comprehensive management study. So I do believe the Corps, maybe in concert with some other partners, and again, I might need to lean on a colleague here, is installing monitoring in Lake Pontchartrain and Mississippi Sound. That's outside of the comprehensive study.
Well,
does that answer your question? Cherie, I think I see you come off of mute. Anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to say that that's our understanding as well, but we can try to get some specifics on that for you, Mr. Blessy, if that would be helpful.
Well, it would be, because the Mississippi Sound Coalition's looked at it, and it's our understanding that more stations are needed and upgraded with the kind of real-time data that would really be helpful for looking at the tipping points. And we actually have commissioned the Northern Gulf Institute to look at tipping points, and they'll be reporting early in the year. We'll give that, of course, to the Corps once that study is out. But it seems to me that if you're really going to take into account the impacts of any alteration or no alteration to the opening of the Bonnet Carré, particularly along with others like the Marganza, et cetera, then understanding, those kinds of water quality impacts, I'm talking about the biological as well as the low salinity of the fresh water, I don't see how that can be outside this study, because, it's really critical to have that information if you're going to fine tune and have more nuanced opening and closing of the various structures simultaneously.
Yes, sir. So let me clarify. So when we would develop a monitoring and adaptive management plan as part of our feasibility study, which would recommend exactly that. It would have recommendations for the required data collection and monitoring needed to evaluate those impacts. So that absolutely, with any change in a structure, any new recommendation, we would have a monitoring plan to go alongside of that.
Well, that's very helpful, Ann. I mean, I think, of course, it may be that Congress has to pay for it, but at least if it's in this study, that's a very strong recommendation. My second question, are you considering as an alternative, a fairly expensive one, I guess, rebuilding the Bonnet Carré and the Morganza so they can be open and closed more efficiently, more quickly, and with modern technology and data? I mean, it seems to me our understanding from the science and the engineering, we understand that's the Mississippi Sound Coalition thus far, is that in 2019, the Bonnet Carré really did not need to be open the second time if it had been able to be open and closed more quickly with the Morganza and others without endangering New Orleans at all. If that's a correct assumption, or even if it's worth studying, it really is important from our standpoint to know whether or not it's possible to rebuild those structures so you can open and close them more quickly. I mean, obviously, the destruction of the oyster beds in the Mississippi Sound has been, and the Western Sound is dramatic, and they haven't come back yet. They're beginning to, but the problem I'm trying to address here is that if you could have opened them and closed them more quickly in 2019, we may not have lost all of those beds. Anyway, that's my question is, are you considering as an alternative rebuilding the Bonnet Carré and the Morganza?
So I can answer that at one of the measures the team has been asked to evaluate is that exact scenario, right? And so what the team has to look at is it technically feasible, and is it cost effective, and does it really make a difference in the end? And so the team is looking at that now to answer those 3 points.
And thank you, Ann. That's good to hear. I'm looking forward to see what they say. So my final question: you mentioned there was a focus group in the Bonnet Carré. Was anyone from the Mississippi Sound Coalition included in that focus group? I mean, who from Mississippi was included in that?
Yeah, no, fair question. So the focus groups were our subject matter experts from mainly from within the Corps, but then we've also been doing some outreach. So we recently had a meeting with the Assistant Secretary of State for Mississippi, and an outcome of that meeting was to have a stakeholder meeting in Mississippi Sound. So we are working with the Mobile District to make that happen. So I'll admit we haven't planned it yet. But that was a suggestion by the Assistant Secretary of State of Mississippi. So we are going to be working to hold kind of a targeted stakeholder event in coastal Mississippi, and again, going to work across our district lines to make that happen, and certainly make sure that you stay in the loop on that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad the Secretary recommended it. Mississippi Sound Coalition would love to participate in that, Ann, and as you know, our congressional delegation sent a letter early in this study, all 4 Congress people and both senators recommending that the Mississippi Sound Coalition and all the local governments, municipalities, and the NGOs be included as key stakeholders, which I hope if you have that meeting on the Mississippi coast, that we'll be invited.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. All right, I'm going to go see if I can find where I left off in the chat. I see Mark Davison, then I think with Mr. Doug Jagel. Doug saying there's been some work done in previous years on potential reconnection to Oxbow Lakes. Yes, the team is familiar with some of that work. Appreciate Garland your offer to help as needed with the model that includes the Chapalaya Puck 8 and the models being developed out of the LWI effort. That's great. Are you considering groundwater recharge within the study? I do know that the team is evaluating some of the groundwater measures that have been proposed. I may need I I don't have them all right at the tip of my tongue. So I may phone a friend here and see if there's a colleague from the study who could maybe speak to some of the groundwater recharge efforts or
Hey,
measures, I should say.
Hey, Ann, it's Sheree. I just wanted to point out that, you know, the current status, if we give you any status today about the measures, just know that we are still vetting some of that through our internal leadership. So it has not been fully vetted or approved at this point. So things can change in the future, but we are considering a potential tiered study effort to look at multiple different aquifer recharge and groundwater implementation measures. We have also talked about implementation of a potential pilot study under LMR comp to look at groundwater recharge. But again, just remember that this is all still very draft at this stage, and we are still vetting this with our leadership. And so things can change as we move forward. But I wanted you all to be aware that that is still on the table as part of the LMR comp study.
Thanks, Sheree. All right. I think we answered Mr. Blessey's comments already. All right. Mark Davis, providing signed measures exempting new microchip manufacturing efforts from NEPA. If located in the Mississippi River Valley, those activities could possibly impact Mississippi River flows, especially at low water times. If exempt from NEPA, how will the Corps be able to plan for and manage flows? That's a very specific NEPA question. And, you know, it's my understanding cumulative effects, right, will have to be, you know, is a part of the NEPA analysis, and that includes identifying, you know, potential impacts from planned industries. But maybe I'll open up to our NEPA lead, Mike, if there's anything to add there.
Well, Ann, this is Mark.
Or Mark, yeah, go ahead.
He just signed this like yesterday, and I think the concern that we're hearing is that, well, if there are very large chip manufacturing, you know, facilities placed in the Mississippi River Valley, taking either surface water or groundwater, and they don't have to do a NEPA analysis whereby they would be, or how they would be impacting, if you will, flows in the Mississippi River for whatever purposes. How will we avoid the potential of an unpleasant, you know, conflict between the priorities for water use in the Mississippi versus other major water users, which are undoubtedly coming into the valley? But this was just signed yesterday, so I don't think there's been much, you know, analysis done of it yet. But it's going to be real.
Hey, Mark, this is Sheree. I do think it's a consideration that we need to keep in mind as far as the overall water budget. Some of the other discussions we've been having, and Caitlin or others can add to this with regard to aquifer recharge in general, is that we wouldn't be pulling off a significant amount of water for those efforts. But again, we would still have to run through those evaluations to see how much water, and especially from a cumulative standpoint, what that would look like. But appreciate you bringing this to our attention. It's something we should be aware of and considering as we move forward.
All right, just getting caught up on the chat here. For the measure screening criteria, how did the team determine if a measure would increase flood risk or affect navigation, assuming you didn't fully model each measure during initial screening and model still being developed? Great question, Hannah. So one of the things that we didn't really get into in this presentation, But one of the early activities that we did was look at what existing information is currently out there that we can leverage to do our initial screening. So in some instances, these are measures that were already modeled in other efforts or other, and there's other data, kind of existing conditions that we can leverage. So if it was information we had, or it was based on in some cases best professional expertise. It was not. I think if it gets to a point where we need the models to make a screening decision, then we will do so. But in some cases, we were able, again, either to use existing information or our or professional expertise to make that assessment if a measure was going to either increase flood risk or affect navigation. And I think I skipped a comment. Sorry, Garland. As the extensive and rapid head cutting that is occurring in the state of Mississippi, upland tributaries extending from the lower Mississippi River, an issue of concern. I do know that is an issue that we've seen through the public scoping process, and that is something that we're looking at. I understand, from the Memphis district, certainly they have they recognize those issues and see it as a priority. I think one of the things the team needs to figure out whether that can be solved within the comp study, or is that one of those things that needs to be tiered off as its own study. But all that to say is the team is aware of that issue and currently kind of assessing how best to either tackle that within the study or outside the study. Make sure I didn't skip anybody else. I'd ask someone on my team if I skip anybody else, please help me out. Don Segura, will saltwater intrusion in the White Lake and Grand Lake areas in Southwest Louisiana be addressed in the study? Is that saltwater intrusion, I guess, from a kind of a water supply, drinking water supply concern, or kind of general like impacts to coastal habitat concern, Mr. Segura?
It's generally habitat concerned and irrigation. A lot of our irrigation, it takes place from water that is in those reservoirs of Grand Lake and White Lake. It's a tremendous freshwater reservoir.
So I think overall, looking at changes in habitat conditions over time is certainly within the scope of the study. I will need the team to maybe help me out behind the scenes here if these two particular areas are within the geography of the study or if these fall outside. I know one of the things that we're looking at, Mr. Segura, and I know you and I, we've talked about this, is if there's other study authorities as well that we can use to address some of these issues. So whether something like this might fall under Outlets to the Gulf or the Bayou Cortable GRR, right, versus LMR comp. But Sheree, I saw that you come off of mute.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna ask Mr. Segura if he could, I wasn't familiar with where, it does say in Southwest Louisiana, where specifically these reservoirs were located. Are they in the Atchafalaya Basin, Mr. Segura?
They are west of the Atchafalaya Basin. They are the west boundary of the study area, I think, would include a small amount of White Lake. But to include all of White Lake and Grand Lake, that west boundary of the study area would have to be shifted or somewhat west. But I do think that some of White Lake is included in the study area.
Okay. Can you let us look into this one further and
Yes.
potentially follow up with you? Okay.
We would appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Let me just go back to see if anybody else has their hand raised. I know I'm just reading questions out the chat, which I'm happy to keep doing. But also if folks want to come off the mute. I don't see any hands raised. There we go. I see Carrie. Carrie, would you like to come off the mute and ask your question, and then we'll go back to the chat?
Hey, thank you so much. And as mentioned in a few of my comments before, if it wasn't for the Mississippi Sound Coalition, I wouldn't have been notified of this meeting. And it's very important to us here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So thank you, Mr. Blessing, for your group to include us on that. Also, too, earlier in your study, you mentioned a lot of things that the study was restricted on doing. And a lot of those things are near and dear to our hearts. If you want to go back to that slide and show what those restrictions are of harm to the estuaries and what have you.
Yes, sir. Give me 1 second to back up. I think you're looking at maybe the constraints slide.
Right, exactly.
Here we go.
Good deal. Species and habitats, water supply, development, those things. The diversions that are proposed and what have you would certainly have an impact on species and habitats for sure over there. And we've seen what the results are of the influx of Mississippi River water on the Mississippi Sound after the spillway opening in 2019. So just looking at that, please consider mark us down for the Mississippi Gulf Coast of other solutions besides diversion, so that our history, our estuaries, our habitats, and our fisheries can remain recovering from 2019 and continue to recover as long as we don't have this intrusion 24/7 for the rest of our lives, which would hurt us over here drastically. Just putting that on comment.
Thank you, sir. Can you, I appreciate when our partners forward our meeting announcements. I know we don't, we may not necessarily have everybody's email on our stakeholder list, but Mr. Carey, if you wouldn't mind emailing lmrcomp@usace, I'll double check. We'll get you added so you get it directly from us going forward.
Good deal.
But again, I also I thank our partners when they put it out on blast so that we reach a bigger audience. I know with that, I know we miss folks sometimes when we advertise these. So I echo your thanks.
Okay. Constraints are good. Okay. Everybody gets protected. Thank you.
All right, let me go back to the chat. All right, can Mike, could someone please speak on how the models being utilized will analyze the relationship between the Bonnie Carey and the Mississippi Sound? So Mike, I can speak at a high level. I think if you're looking for maybe a more technical discussion, we can either follow up by email, or maybe we can try to touch on it during this presentation. But I do know that one of the things, as part of, and let me go to the modeling slide. We can look at the domain together. The hydrodynamic model, whoops, I forwarded too fast. We'll be looking, at potential changes to the operation of our existing Mississippi River and Tributaries project, which include our structures like Bonnie Carey Spillway, Morganza, and others. And as we, if we were to have an alternative to recommend that would change those, we would be required to look at the impacts, right, and analyze the benefits and impacts as a result of those. I think if you're looking for maybe a more in-depth modeling discussion, that's something that we'll have to kind of prepare and get back to you on. Maybe that's something that also we can do a deeper dive in a future quarterly public update as well.
And I can add to this a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, please do, Sheree.
So we're currently, with regard to changes in the operation of the Bonnie Carey Spillway, we're looking at the art of the possible, right? We're looking at it from a river standpoint at this moment in time, to see how we could turn the knobs and redistribute water through Old River, Morganza, and Bonnie Carey. But in the future, in the study, we are going to take a look and see if we will model. ERDIC does have some models of the Mississippi Sound region. So we would look to see if we would pull that in to the study at that point, but we haven't gotten that far with the modeling scoping yet. We do know that any change to Bonnie Carey would, as far as a reduction in flows would be, beneficial. So we are looking at that as a benefit, but we will determine further down the road in the study how much modeling would occur in the Mississippi Sound Basin. But we are also, again, this is currently draft, but we're considering the potential for a tiered Mississippi Sound study. So that's another avenue for us to continue to look at Mississippi Sound with other freshwater inputs. But again, still being vetted with leadership, but that is something that's on the table currently.
Thanks, Sheree. I see there's several, there's a lot, I see a lot of comments, and so appreciate all the comments in the chat. I'm not going to sit here and read every comment out loud, but I am kind of looking around for where some of the questions are, so we make sure we hit on all those questions. It looks like some have been answered in the chat, and again, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to come off and mute. It looks like Matt answered the question about closed captioning. Thanks, Matt. Since this is, yeah, go ahead, Sheree.
Oh, sorry. Catherine Holcomb has brought up a comment about the Water Institute is beginning the planning of a resilience lab in Morgan City, and saying hopefully LMRC will send someone to participate in this initiative because Hurricane Francine's impact on the Atchafalaya area merits close collaboration and presence. Just wanted you to see that one.
No, thanks, Kat. And I saw that email come through this week to the LMR comp account, or maybe it was late last week. Thanks, Catherine. We will definitely get back to you and appreciate. And that goes for everybody. You know, feel free to invite. If there's any sort of a event that you're hosting that you would like a member of the LMR comp team to attend, please send us an email, lmrcomp@usace.army.mil. And we're happy to participate in, you know, any and all stakeholder events to the extent practicable. I do see some questions about mid-Barataria sediment diversion. That is a project, that is the state of Louisiana's project. We won't be answering questions today on specific to mid-Barataria. Okay. Susan, I see your comment. I'm happy to pass that along to my St. Louis district colleagues to see if we can get you a response. I'm not exactly sure what project that's in reference to, but if we can make connections across districts, certainly we can certainly try to help facilitate that.
They've always been so great, and all of a sudden I'm getting nowhere with them. So I don't know. I thought, well, maybe they've changed their emails or something, but in the past they've been like family. In this flooding thing, you get to know people pretty well, and it never ends, so we have to keep on working.
Okay, Susan. No, thanks for your comment. And we'll let me see if we can connect you. I see a hand. I guess I'll go back to online. I see a hand. Someone with a hand raised. Brian.
Hello, thank you. Brian Rafferty with Marquette. Have you all had any interaction or communication with the Missouri River Study Group and what's going on up there, and making sure that the two studies mesh together fine? And then where do we stand? I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but in terms of all the districts, Nashville District, Arkansas River, Missouri River, Upper Miss, Ohio, some kind of discussion about cohesive water resource management?
Can you say the name of this in your first question, the name of the study, and you said the Missouri?
There's a Missouri River study going on right now. It actually started about a year earlier than the LMR study, and I think there may be opportunities to have some interaction with that study group to kind of see what's going on up there and how that might affect water resources on the lower Mississippi River and so forth.
That's the LOMO study and the lower Missouri River study.
That's what. Yeah. Thanks, Sheree. No, we have talked with that study team. In fact, we've had a few conversations, kind of leveraging some of the lessons learned from their efforts. We probably are due for a check-in with them. So actually, I really appreciate you, Brian, bringing that up and kind of reminding us of other efforts that are going on within the Corps. And so that is a good one that we should kind of check in with and see where they are in their study process, and if there's anything there that might influence our recommendations. but I've talked with, I believe the project manager for that is Colleen. So we'll definitely reach out. Thanks for that, Brian. And I'm sorry, can you say your second question again?
Oh, I'm just curious if there's been further discussion about more cohesive reservoir and water resource management between the various districts. Nashville District with the Tennessee Cumberland, Arkansas River with all of their resources, and of course the Missouri River is important as well.
Yes, sir. In fact, I believe there's a meeting happening amongst the districts, and I'll ask maybe if Kate wanted to speak to that. Anyway, there is some multi-district collaboration going on that topic, and I think in coordination with the National Weather Service as well, kind of looking at those the operation of those structures collectively.
Yes, that's correct. And we are looking more comprehensively at the system and ways that we can help during low water or high water, and using the reservoirs to do that. However, under this study, we will be looking at their current authorities. So doing that within their current authorities, but we do have recommendations to look at a greater Mississippi River Basin, more comprehensive study that would look at cross-district, cross-division boundaries, as well as outside of authorities for a more systemic management approach for the Mississippi River Basin.
Thanks, Kate. I do see several comments from Mr. Kenneth in the chat, and I know has submitted online or submitted to our email box. So certainly all of the public comments we are taking in, and we are reading every single one of them. We are focusing today on the Lower Mississippi River comp study and answering questions specific to the comp study today. I think I saw Charlie's hand up first, so I'm going to go to Charlie and then to Bill, since we haven't heard from Bill, and then I'll go back to you, Dean. So Charlie, go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm the former district commander for the Corps, which is on this incredibly interesting stuff here. Are you guys with the comp study interacting at all with the Mississippi River Commission, and how are you doing that? They start at the top and they work all the way down. We got these great tributaries called the Missouri River and the Ohio River, and this whole Great Basin. And I just that's a very powerful body that can leverage a lot of stuff for you guys. So I just wonder how you interact with the Mississippi River Commission. Thanks.
Yeah, no, appreciate the question, and great to see a former commander online joining us today. So I actually had the opportunity to ride alongside the Mississippi River Commission during their April high water trip. So we are actively engaging with the commission during the study. So in April, I rode along the whole trip. I was there to engage with the public and talk about the study and hear concerns. And then at every meeting, even the meeting that we had in August, we had team members at the low water trip at each of the stops, again, there to talk about the study and answer questions. The Mississippi River Commission will also have an opportunity to review the draft and final feasibility report. And as you know, the Commanding General of Mississippi Valley Division also serves as the president of the LMRC, in addition to in her role as the Commanding General of the Mississippi Valley Division. And she is very involved and helps us make that connection with the commission. Thank you for that question. And I think I saw Billy. I previously called him Billy. I don't see his hand up anymore, but let me just see if Bill. Yes, sir. Bill, go ahead. And
Okay.
Dean, I'll come to you next.
Yes, just as a representative of the St. Mary Levy District and a Atchafalaya representative of CPRA, we just want to remind all that opening the Morganza spillway historically has always put floodwaters into the Atchafalaya and has put all of the cities to the south of Morganza in a flood condition. So just, please know that we are concerned about any more water that would be going into the Atchafalaya River. And we do not want to be flood fighting every year. That's my comment.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for the, Sheree, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, you're spot on, Bill. Any additional water that we put into the Atchafalaya Basin as a result of changes to how we currently operate Morganza or the Old River Control Structure will need to be fully evaluated for any flood impacts and environmental impacts as well.
Dean, go ahead. And then I'm going to go after Dean, I'm going to go back to the chat.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention and maybe ask you, Ann, some things that can be done for full capacity in the Atchafalaya Basin, actually they're free. I don't know how much people understand that the Atchafalaya Basin and the spillway cannot pass anymore the projected flood, and it's getting worse. We're filling up that basin, and we're going to lose the capacity of use the Morganza spillway, to for protection. And some of the things that can be in the study is what to do in the future, because a lot of the filling of those wetlands is, the government is spending millions of dollars to actually fill wetlands in the Atchafalaya Basin. And at one point, we went alone from those projects. They started with Bayou Eugene, built huge amounts of wetlands, and then didn't learn from that. They did Buffalo Cove. The fishermen told them we'll fill those wetlands. They were ignored. They say, okay, we're going to put sediment traps. It was so much sediment moving in that within a few months, the sediment traps were obsolete and they couldn't be managed. And it was so much sand moving into the system that LSU had some stations to measure sedimentation. They couldn't even reach those sites because of sedimentation. And then after that, they did the Bayou project. And the same thing, they filled so much wetlands that they couldn't reach the paths to measure how much sedimentation happened. They're below 3 feet in one season. And now they're doing another project, the Israel project. It's going to be the same thing. The river diversions, they're filling those wetlands and lakes and bayous. And every time you do a project like this, and you authorize a project like this, you will lose flood capacity. And once we lose flood capacity, you cannot go back in time and get it again. That's gone forever. So maybe, part of the study could be what we should not be doing in the future. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Dean, for your comments. There are some comments, I think, about kind of how to handle the crevasses in the lower river. And that is something that the team is looking at, is recognizing the changing, the new crevasses and just the changing dynamics of the lower Mississippi River. That is something currently being looked at under the study. Are there any specific measures that are being considered in the Missouri stretch of the river at this time, Birds Point flood or otherwise? Mike Throne, you or Sheree, one of you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll just say that we had a measure that was looking specifically at setting back a levee at Birds Point, New Madrid, which has been looked at 2 or 3 times in the past. And the outcome of that is that from an economic standpoint, it would be extraordinarily expensive to set that levee back, and there would be significant real estate impacts to some agricultural areas as well. And so in looking at that existing information at this time, that particular measure has been screened for Birds Point, New Madrid. And as far as the Missouri, like I mentioned earlier, we are looking at locks, dams, and reservoirs and inputs from that region and the river. But we are still scoping that effort out, but we are cross-collaborating with Great Lakes Division and other districts up and down the valley to ensure that we consider what's appropriate as inputs from the Missouri River, the Ohio River, and how we operate those locks and dams.
Either I was going to see if either Mike or Laura wanted to speak to maybe some of the ecosystem restoration work that's being looked at in that area. Or am I mixing locations? But Mike and Laura. Yeah, go ahead.
That's Mike. So there's several system-wide measures that address ecosystem restoration that the team's working on getting some site specificity to. Things like restoring side channels and other system-wide measures that could occur at many different locations. So there's absolutely will be opportunities, up and down the river. Missouri, the Missouri Reach would be one of those. I did want to point out another measure that is adjacent to both Missouri and Kentucky. So that's the Hickman Hard Point. So that came up in scoping and it's come up several times in the past. So the stabilizing the Hickman Hard Point there around Hickman, Kentucky, which is right across from Missouri there. Stabilizing that is an important issue that's been brought up. So the team is looking at addressing that ways to both stabilize it, make sure it stays put, and as well as increasing the potential for navigation around it to keep the navigation industry from running into it and degrading it from running into it, et cetera. So I wanted to point those out.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And that gave me a chance to get a little caught up in the chat. It looks like some of my colleagues have responded to some of the comments. Thanks, Ricky, for answering some of Kenneth's questions. Appreciate that. And I see some additional comments here by Sean and others. I'm not seeing any more questions.
And if you'd like, we have a couple of phone numbers on there. We could try seeing if any of the phone call-ins have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. No, thanks for that reminder. So if you're on the phone, and you're not on the WebEx, if you press *6, then you can unmute yourself and either ask a question or leave a comment.
Yes. Hold on a second. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I think it was sent. May have been sent Tuesday. We got it this.
All right, anybody on the phone want to come off of mute? Again, that would be *6. Hannah, yes, go ahead. I see that you have your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that setback levy measure that you said was screened. I guess I'm wondering if the team has been engaging with other agencies like NRCS to think about how conservation easements could be used to address some, real estate concerns for projects like setback levies. And if I'm sure y'all have, but if you've, engaged some of the Corps staff who worked on the L536 levy setback, for example, and thought about some of the lessons learned from that project that was able to move forward.
Hannah, this is Sheree. I'll say that the conservation easements and the programs that NRCS implements has come up multiple times on the study, and we have noted that for collaboration with them. And we have discussed Birds Point New Madrid with some of the NGO groups as well. This particular setback levy is a lot more complex, and I don't think that it could be resolved with conservation easements through NRCS, but there are other areas where there is potential for that and working with them in their program. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, and it is something that we do plan to collaborate with them on.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up or questions in the chat. This has been a really great a lot of engagement today. I think maybe one of the most participants we've gotten in one of these, and certainly the most engagement we've gotten. So really appreciate all the questions, even the tough ones. So I'll keep the line open, see if there's anything more comes to mind. I'll put, I know several folks have already dropped off. I'll put another, and I've had the slide, Sharon, if you're still looking at the screen. Again, asking for input on the effectiveness of this meeting. So please do take, the 30 seconds to fill out the form. Maybe I'd ask somebody from my team if you could copy. I can't copy from the slide as I'm sharing it, but if somebody could copy and paste that link into the chat to make it easier, that would be great. Else folks can use their phone camera to scan it and fill that out. I'll do one last call for questions or comments. All right, hearing none, we'll do a final reminder of how you can get in touch with us. You can always visit our study website for up-to-date information. You can email us at lmrcomp@usace.army.mil. If you did not receive the meeting notice directly from us, and if you would like to in the future, please send us an email so that we have your contact information. But again, I really appreciate our partners who blast our notices out to even a broader distribution list to really make sure that we get the word out. And finally, you can also submit any comments by mail at the address you see here on the screen. So with that, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to catching up with you in the near future.